Welcome to CEO Insights. I'm Marilyn de Guzman with InvestingNews.com. Australian resource exploration company Impact Minerals recently received a $2.87 million funding boost for its Lake Hope high purity alumina project. Speaking with me now is Mike Jones, Managing Director of Impact Minerals. Welcome, Mike.
Hi, Marilyn. Great to be here on INN.
Great to have you. So let's talk about that good news. The new government funding. Give us an overview of where these funds will be allocated.
Yes, certainly. Look, our Lake Hope project, which is located about 500 kilometres east of Perth here in Western Australia, where we're based, is a quite unique project in which we are going to dig up the top 2 metres of the lake clay. They contain some very unique minerals, and we're going to convert that into high purity alumina, or HPA as it's called. Now, HPA is probably not quite widely known, but it is actually a crucial part of the energy transition, and it is used in a variety of end markets, including in particular LEDs, light emitting diodes. In every LED, there's a small piece of sapphire wafer that's been made from HPA, and it's just one of the many uses, but that's the biggest and fastest growing market which we hope to enter. So the federal grant that we got came through a cooperative project between ourselves, our engineering company that's been helping us with our engineering studies on our pre-feasibility study, which is where the project is at right now, and also a university here in Western Australia called Edith Cowan University. And basically, the grant is about 45% of a larger project looking at sustainable development of high purity alumina from the start of the mining through the processing and then through to creating the end user products which they need. And the reason we got the funding, I think, is that HPA is actually on the critical minerals list for Australia, also Europe, and in North America. So that is opening avenues for us for non-dilutive funding. And this one is the first grant that we've won, and we're very happy with it.
So for the viewers that are not too familiar with it, could you maybe talk about why HPA is getting such significant support from the Australian government and making it in the critical minerals list, I guess, from the perspective of the other battery metals that's also in demand?
Sure. So high purity alumina is the two main producers are the Japanese, a company called Sumitomo in particular. They're the largest producer of HPA, but the rest of the production actually comes mostly from China. Now, interestingly, we've just actually done an in-depth study of the Chinese HPA market, and they actually export very little. So unlike things like antimony, which has just been in the news very recently as a critical mineral that China was supplying to the world, they don't really supply that much HPA to the world, which has opened up a vast market for us in Europe and Asia and even North America. So the governments have been, put HPA on the list because the little bit of supply that was coming from China was fairly crucial. As I mentioned, it's used in LEDs. It is used in the battery metals, in batteries, It's used as a coating on the anodes and the cathodes in these batteries, but also in particular it's used as a separator between the cathode and the anode to prevent heat buildup. So high purity alumina, another word of looking at that is corundum. It's one of the hardest substances, natural substances known to man. And it is thermally inert, it's chemically inert. And so what it does, it allows chemistry to go through from one end of the battery to the other, but it doesn't allow the heat to build up. So what happens if the battery's not made properly and that separator peels away from the battery wall, the batteries catch on fire. And so everyone's seen the pictures of the Tesla, cars on fire. And if you remember a few years ago, the Samsung phones were exploding in people's pockets. And that's because the separator wasn't doing its job properly. It's also used in ceramics, medical technologies, optics, et cetera, and increasingly actually in semiconductors themselves. And there's a big growth demand in there, especially with all the semiconductors being used now for AI. So small market, but growing very rapidly and clearly a critical part of the mineral supply chain going forward.
And this may be a good time to talk about Lake Hope project. Why is it a compelling HPA resource for you?
So production of high purity minerals is all about the process and getting to this purity. And there are different levels of purity, but the benchmark is what we call 4N or 4 nines, which means it's 99.99% pure. And it's interesting how difficult it is, whether you're in HPA or manganese or graphite, to get those last few parts per million out of your natural materials. So Lake Hope has, and so that's a costly exercise. And the Chinese and the Japanese I mentioned earlier have very high input costs because they're using what's called bauxite, which has been mined in a alumina mine. It's gone through refining. It's a very dirty, energy-intensive process. And so their energy and input costs are very high. So over the last few years, there's been a drive to lower those operating costs by looking at alternative methods to make HPA. And our particular deposit has a unique set of minerals in them. They're sulfates rather than clay, which is mostly used by our peers. And that allows a much cheaper processing method. And not only that, as I mentioned, it is in the top 2 meters of a salt lake. And basically, there are what we call the evaporites. The rain has brought the materials in, other minerals been washed in from the sides. It's evaporated and left this beautiful clay. So you can imagine that trying to mine something like that is very straightforward. It has a very low environmental footprint. There's no crushing or grinding or beneficiation of the material required. We just intend to dig it up, put it on some trucks, and bring it to Perth where we will process it. So you can imagine then that our input costs for the mining are actually very small. And then similarly with the processing, the nature of those minerals allows us to use cheaper acids and reagents to get to HPA than all of our peers. So we believe that we can produce HPA at the lowest cost globally from what we understand at the moment. And that's a very important space to be. You've got to be in the lowest cost quartile no matter what commodity you're in order to make it through the cycle. And so, yeah, those all things together, the deposit, the minerals that are in it, are the key drivers for the uniqueness of the deposit and the low operating costs.
You're also ramping up your efforts to secure offtake agreements. What's your strategy for this?
So offtake is what it's all about in industrial minerals and bulk commodities like ours. And they are very niche markets. And so there's a lot of work to be done at the back end of the process to actually produce the specification that the end user wants. And the way it normally works is that you provide a trial sample to a client, and then they come back saying, yes, we've put it into our batteries, we've put it into our LEDs, we've turned them on and off 10,000 times. It's doing the right thing. Send us some larger samples, and then we'll put it into qualification trials and then look for the offtake. So we've got some very strong feedback that really customers won't take you seriously until you've got a pilot plant. And you can show them that you're there for the long haul, you've got feasibility studies done, because you can imagine that if they're going to change their supply chain, they want to make sure that the product is good quality and that the supplier is going to be there, over the next few years. So the good thing, so we won't really fully get into actually contacting clients and getting to market until middle of next year, by which time we should have our pilot plant built, because that is actually a crucial part of the federal grant that we've just got. So we'll be ordering long lead time items very shortly, project kickoff, and look to start building that the pilot plant by the end of next quarter. So it's a very fast track. In the meantime, we've hired a very experienced marketing manager. He's actually doing an in-depth research of the end users, product specifications, etc. So we can roll out our marketing plan and start in earnest by about the middle of next year.
Hmm. So what do we expect from the company for the next over the next near term for the project?
So the big thing we're working on at the moment is completing the pre-feasibility study. That is almost done. We were hoping to get it done by the end of this year, but amazingly enough, the mining industry is extremely busy, and getting quotes and final reports from people has turned out to be a bit of a drag, no matter how much I shout at them. And so that'll be finished in the first quarter of next year. That's a critical decision point for us, because the project that we have, it is under option at the moment. And so by completing the pre-feasibility study, if we elect to move forward, it'll be a joint venture, but we will then have 80% of the company and the intellectual property that's built around the Lake Hope. And so far, so good. All the indications of the pre-feasibility study is going very well, and it looks like we will have a project. And so that's the key thing, there's a lot of news between now and then, even though Christmas and New Year's coming up, we're very busy. And we've also be drilling some of our sort of more conventional exploration projects in the first and second quarter of next year as well. So hopefully a lot of good news to come.
Great. Love to have you again to give us more updates on that project. Thanks again, Mike, for joining me today.
Not a problem, Marilyn, and see you again sometime.
And thanks everyone for watching. Join us again next time for another edition of CEO Insights.